Hey, this is Tristan with a quick tutorial on setting up glass materials in Unity 5 using the default standard shader. So there's a lot of complicated things that you can do to create glass effects, including writing your own custom shaders, to create ripple or distortion effects, and doing kind of really elaborate stuff. But I wanted to focus on the idea of just creating a basic functional glass using the built-in system. So I have kind of this example scene, and I've got a couple of little objects around the environment that are going to help me see whether something is reflective or not. And in fact, I'm actually going to go ahead and make a couple more objects. Just so I'm going to make like a capsule character kind of thing that I'm going to stick on. I'll put it right here so that we can see, we'll be able to see through the glass, and we'll make sure that our transparency is really working exactly how we want it to be. But let's go ahead and actually make a material for glass. So I'm going to right click in my project and select create material, and that'll create a standard shader, default standard shader. And I'm going to go ahead and call this M glass. And then I have these quads in the scene, and just to give you an idea of how these work, right now I actually have a quad for the front and a quad for the back. And that's because in forward rendering you actually need to separate the front and the back panels. If you're using deferred rendering, you don't have to do that. But in general, I think this is a good illustration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select all of those quads, and I'm going to drag my glass material onto them. And then basically I want to configure a few settings for this. But before I'm going to really be able to tell if my glass is working or not, I'm actually going to have to set up a couple of reflection probes. And that's because glass is incredibly dependent on an accurate representation of a reflection of the environment. Otherwise, it's just not going to look like glass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop into the game object menu, go to light, and reflection probe. And I'm going to then kind of fit the reflection probe to the environment so that I can get a good reflection from both sides. And I'm going to click the edit button so that I can edit the bounds of the reflection probe. And then I'm going to just slide this in so that it is including the side of the wall that is including that glass panel, and then it's kind of butting up against the wall. And I'm going to use a box projection to get this to look the best, so that it's the most accurate reflection to this particular section. So I'm going to check box projection. And then what I can do is I can actually just copy this reflection probe over to the other side, and then make some tweaks to ensure that it's where I want to have it. So as long as I can see the the wall is through, the wall of the reflection probe is through the glass pane, that should be fine. And so then basically what we can do is we can select our glass material in the project, and we can change the smoothness so that it looks more reflective. But this is one little cheat that you want to be aware of for working with something like glass, which is that glass actually is more reflective than the default dielectric or non-metallic PBR shader is going to represent. So glass is always going to be at least partly metallic. And you'll notice that as I bring the metallic portion up, I get a better idea of a reflection of the environment, a more accurate reflection of the environment, which is very, very helpful. But right now it's not a glass in the usual sense. And actually, I think that we may need to make some tweaks here, because it looks like I think that it might be the outside reflection probe. Looks like it's overlapping with the environment here. So I can, let's see if I slide it over a little bit. Yeah, okay, so we've got to be a little bit careful of where our reflection probes are placed. Because they do have kind of like a blend distance. So in this case, because this is really sharp, I could actually correct this by just changing the blend distance to 0. And then each of those reflection probes would be contributing only to their own exact region. And then another option would be to work in deferred. But okay, so so now that we've got that, we'll notice that if I start moving the directional light around, I can see it's kind of it kind of creates a little bit of like a reflection, and it looks pretty okay, but obviously we can't see through it right now. So let's just go ahead and jump into our standard shader, and under the rendering mode, I'm going to change it from opaque to transparent. And then in the albedo, I just need to reduce the alpha so that I can start seeing things through through the glass. Now, one thing that you need to be really extra careful of is that the more metallic an object is, the less transparent it actually can be. So if I'm looking at this dramatic capsule through the window, I have to reduce the metallic a little bit to basically take out some of the contribution of the reflection and allow it to be more translucent, or more matching the translucency that we set here. And obviously the more opaque it is, the less you're going to see through. And you got to just kind of like feel that out and find a balance. But one other thing that I usually think is helpful is that you want to have a slightly darker albedo than you might think that you would. And this depends on what your scenario is, but in a lot of cases, having a slightly darker albedo actually creates a more accurate look for the lighting of your glass. And if it's all the way black, obviously you're not going to see much in the way of the reflection, and you don't want that to be the case. So I usually make it kind of like a light gray, so that I get it a little bit darker than the default, and it tends to look better that way. So then the last thing that we can do is I want to add in a little bit of like a normal contour to this, so that it looks like it has a little bit of a warping or wrapping of the light around it. So if I jump into Photoshop, see I've made this quick texture here where I have just kind of like it's going from a black fade to white in a square. And so if I jump into Unity, I can go ahead and export that, so I can like save as like a PNG or something like that. And then I can drop that into Unity. And this is just kind of a quick and dirty way of doing this, but you can go to the texture type and you can select normal matte and create from grayscale. And in this case, I know that I'm gonna probably want this to be around 0.1, or actually I'm gonna probably do 0.05. And then under the filtering, I'm gonna select smooth, and I think I'll just kind of leave this a little bit default, and that should be okay for right now. It's not going to be a perfect effect. Oh, 0.1 is a little bit too low. Okay, so I've got 0.5 there. So then if I go to my material, under the normal map, I can just drop my normal map into that. And then you'll notice it creates a subtle kind of distortion effect around the edges of the glass panels, which makes it look like it's kind of a little bit warped. And this is something that you can do to just give it a little bit more contour detail, so it doesn't look like there's a one-to-one like it's totally flat with no shape at all, because a lot of times glass will actually be a little bit warped or bent, and that's why it doesn't look like it's creating a 100% perfect reflection. And then you could do more elaborate things like actually adding in shapes and that kind of thing. But I think that that's probably a good primer on how to set up glass. So to avoid having this tutorial go any further or take any longer, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. So basically just the main things that you want to keep an eye out for are you want to make your glass smooth, so kind of in the 0.8 to 1 range without going probably fully 1, because that's a little bit much. You want it to have a decent amount of metallic so that it'll have a clearer reflection, and then you want the albedo to be whatever the color of your glass is supposed to be, but a little bit darker than the full bright values. And then you can add in normal maps and all that kind of stuff. So, okay, yeah, thanks for watching. Hopefully this is a helpful primer in just getting started with making glass materials without having to write in any custom shaders. So, all right, thanks.